Hey guys, I'm Angela and welcome back to Hobby Night. A couple weeks ago, I showed you how to get a night table ready for Warhammer 40k. And this week, I'm going to pull out some additional details and we're gonna show you how to weather his armor. So let's go ahead and get to it. That's right, we're going to be focusing on weathering armor today. This is something that I have been a little terrified to try out, but also very excited to get to because I think it's going to take my paint jobs to the next level. So today we're going to focus on a little bit of extra detail work on the model first, and then we'll be able to get to our weathering. Let's start by talking about the details that I want to work on. Last time I got the model battle ready and I was pretty satisfied with him, but I think there's some things on the guns and other weapons as well as his chassis that I can pull out to add a little bit more variety and color to the model. So we're going to use a bit of glazing technique here, which is just using our contrast paints, thinning them down with a little bit of water, and then putting that directly over top some of the gray panels we've already painted. I'm going to focus on details specifically on the chainsaw as well as his gun, but also, like I said, on the torso. We're going to use a little bit of black first. After that, we're going to move on to our Fleshtearers red once more, and we're even going to do a little bit of glazing with our yellow and green colors just to enhance things. The next thing that I want to consider, because I'm going to need to let aspects of that dry, is the base. So I've pulled out his base and I want to go through my bits and find some rocks and other things to put on here. So we're actually going to go through the drawers that you constantly see behind me and in my photos when I'm taking things on Instagram. So let's actually pull some of these out. I need to find the drawer with the rocks and stuff. Here they are. Here they are. All right.
Oh, you're gonna need the powders later too.
I will need the powders later, so we'll go ahead and pull all of our powders out because we will be using these Tamiya powders later. But really what we want to look at are some of these rock pieces. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the base and I want to put his legs on it. I'm kind of thinking probably like that. Is that?
I would face him a little more the other way.
Like this way?
Yeah,
okay.
That way. Just for moving, you sort of want to minimize the silhouette off of the base.
That makes sense.
Because otherwise, when a knight is trying to move through terrain, it can be painful, especially with that tail.
That is actually a great call out, and I was not thinking about it. So yes, we'll flip him around this way. I like that because his tail's only hanging off a little bit and not even his knees really go forward.
Yeah, it gives you a lot of space, I think. I'm going to go overhead. A lot of space behind him to decorate as well.
Yeah, so I'll get a nice space here and a nice space here to decorate, and even maybe a nice space like right here. So let's go ahead and start pulling out some rock bits or maybe some tile bits and see what we like. I'm definitely thinking I'm leaning towards the rocks just to go with what we did on our other knight, because I do want them to still match because they are going to be in the same army together. So they're not going to be like identical, but I want them to be somewhat similar. So I think I'm going to stick with some rock pieces, and I might go with some just smaller pieces in clusters is kind of what I'm leaning towards. Because I'm noticing in my collection, I have a lot of these really nice sort of thin, like slender pieces of rock.
Of rubble, yeah.
Of rubble, and I think that might be kind of neat to go along like the outside since I've got some slightly narrower areas to work with, while sticking some of the bigger pieces like in the center. Okay, so for this next step, we need some foam, and you may or may not have already heard of this trick, but we're going to use pluck foam out of the containers that we store our models in. In order to do that, I need to head upstairs to my game room so that I can actually get some of the foam. So let's walk up here, and we need to separate these tables apart because I've actually got all of my cases stored underneath my table, which is one of the reasons that I love this desk so much. But we need to get them apart, so let's get that foam. After having separated my wargaming tables, plucked out a bit of foam from my war cases, we can now actually get to sponging on some battle damage. And we're going to do that by ripping that piece of sponge directly in half so we have an uneven edge to work with. What we're going to do after that is we're going to apply 2 different paint colors, starting with our shadow color, which I'm just going to be using a black, but you can use whatever darker color tone that you want. We're going to use the sponge to dab up some of that black paint, then on a paper towel, dab a lot of it back off because we want to create a cool pattern. And once you see on that paper towel that you have a pattern you like that you're getting from your sponge, you can start applying the color to the armor. And I'm going to do this on all of the edges of the armor, specifically focusing on some of the colored pieces like the yellow, the black, and the red. Doing a little bit of work on some of the gray areas that we painted, but mostly focusing on those armor panels. Once I'm happy with how I've dabbed on the black paint, we're going to use this exact same technique, but this time using a silver color tone. And I'm going to be focusing this time on all of those gray areas that we had avoided previously. This is going to make it look like that armor has been scratched and chipped, and we are going to use a little bit of the silver on some of those armor panels where we have the yellow, red, and black, but very, very lightly over the black, so that only some sections look like they've chipped all the way through to expose that metal underneath. Once I'm happy with all that, we can actually move on to the weathering powders. Hey guys, I just wanted to jump in and let you know that I've recently started live streaming. So if you never want to miss those, or if you've been enjoying the content you're watching today, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon for notifications. Now, let's go ahead and jump back to the video. All right, we're done with the paints and now we can move on to the new products, the Tamiya Weathering Masters, aka Weathering Powders. Now, I've never used these before, but it's something I've been very, very interested in, and my experience with them honestly was pretty thrilling. I'm very excited. Let me tell you exactly what we're going to be doing, because I'm going to be using 2 specific rust colors today. The first one isn't even really a rust color, it's soot. And we're gonna start with that. Now, the Tamiya packaging comes with an applicator brush that you can use. One tip has a sponge side, which really reminds me of makeup applicators, the kind that you use for applying eyeshadow, and the other is a brush tip. For the soot, I'm going to stick with the makeup looking side where it's got the sponge. I'm going to get this liberally covered with the soot coloring, and then I'm going to shove it into those crevices, specifically focusing on the armor panels where I've got red, yellow, and black. I really think that will make this look really gritty and dark and grimy, and I'm really happy with my results almost immediately. Now, we are going to be using this color a little bit on some of the gray areas, specifically some of the guns and weapons, because I figured, you know, they're shooting off bullets and stuff. There's going to be residue and soot and grime, and we want to put this color on the smokestacks that are on his torso. After I'm satisfied with what I've done with the soot, we're going to switch over to the brush tip applicator, and we're going to apply an actual rust color this time. We're going to focus the rust color on the more silver areas of our model, specifically the legs, the gun, and those kinds of areas, and the underside of the chassis. Now, at one point, I do end up switching to a larger brush, one that I don't use for paints, just for ease of being able to get into those deeper recesses, but I really find the applicator that Tamiya provided in the kit worked very well. You can even use Q-tips to apply these materials, which I did a little bit as well. Once I'm satisfied with the rust, and oh man, does this thing bring this model to life, it's so amazing, we can move on to the last details. We're about to get bloody for the blood god, because we need to bloody up his chainsword. There's no way that after griming him up and making him look rusty that we can make his weapons remain clean. So I'm going to use a little bit of the Blood for the Blood God technical paint. I know I said we were done with paints. I don't count this one as a real, I mean, it's a paint, but you know, whatever, it's a technical paint, it's a little bit different. We're going to lightly apply this to the chainsword. Now, I don't want to go too heavy with this at first because I don't want to make it look overly cartoonily messed up with blood. I want it to look a bit more subtle, that when you get up close, you're like, oh, what has this guy been up to? But I don't want it to just be like utter gore everywhere. And I'm really happy with the results that I got. I even brought a little bit of splatter back because as the chain sword would be revving, it'd be throwing particles of blood on the underside. So I made sure to hit some of the cables and the undercarriage of the gun as well to add to the effect. All right, let's get back to our base, because the rocks have dried, I've primed the base up, and now we need to spread some texture paint on there and let that dry. And for this, because I want to match the other knights in my collection, I'm going to be using Armageddon Dust. This goes down very smoothly. I do use a significant portion of a fresh pot, so sometimes when you're working on these bigger bases, it might be better to possibly buy one of the pre-mades, or at least maybe just like go collect some sand from outside and sprinkle that on rather than using the texture paints. But hey, lessons learned. And honestly, I do really like the textures I end up getting out of it, so I'm not exactly upset that I use so much paint. It's just something to keep in mind. After the texture paint has had plenty of time to dry, we do the Agrass Earth wash shade, and we let that dry too. Once that's finished, we're gonna go ahead and do a single dry brush using Talloran Sand one more time, going over everything. Then we're gonna come back in with a final dry brush using Wraithbone and focus this mostly on the rocks, but very lightly on the dirt as well, just to help blend everything together. And at the end, my base looks fantastic, and we just need to get this sucker glued onto it, and then I can show you the final model. And here he is! Isn't he glorious? I am going to set him off to the side because he makes me a little nervous to hold because he's so gigantic, but I am so pleased with how this has turned out. My knight looks stunning. Weathering powders are very, very cool, and I wish I had tried them earlier. I know a lot of you in the comments have constantly suggested them and been like, why aren't you weathering things? And I'm like, I get it now. I get it now. They're really fun and actually quite easy to work with. I was really shocked by that because I really expected there to be like a medium I needed to use or something else that I had to do to get the powders to really stick to the model, but that really isn't the case. They just kind of cling to it and it works really well. And the rust effect especially, although the soot effect too on the shoulders, like there's so many things that I like about having used the Tamiya Weathering Masters powders. Like they're just insane. Plus, the sponging was actually really fun. I really especially like how the silver turned out on the legs. That looks stunning, and I just really like how it enhanced everything. Overall, this is definitely something I'm going to try to incorporate into my models a bit more, especially since I feel like the model still fits my brighter, cartoonier vibe, but does have a little bit of that grimdark element to it a bit more, and I'm really, really enjoying that. So expect to see weathering powders a lot more in my tutorials, especially on terrain. Like, I cannot wait to work on some terrain and just go to town using the huge variety of different powders that I have. If you guys have enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit that like, subscribe for more, and before I head out, I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons for making it so content like this can continue to happen. Without you guys doing that, we just wouldn't be making this channel, so thank you very, very much. I have been Angela, and I hope you have a wonderful hobby night.